listeners. You're listening to 18 Minutes with Satyal and Silwal. I'm Satyal.
And I'm Silwal, and we're a weekly podcast on the Himalayas.
One is a Tuesday, and it's 7:30. You know it's time for perspectives, conversations, and stories.
Welcome to the 71st episode, and for the first time ever, we're not recording from a MacBook. Now, something went wrong. Everything has gone differently today, so we're doing this episode in Tamil right now. Cue the Tamil music.
And it goes a little something like this. Oh yeah.
Now, other than that, we're at Keplering where we hang out with the robot. This is his new production house, so let's hope for newer and better videos and podcasts in the coming weeks and months. But having said that, somehow we were recording from Satyal's MacBook, and suddenly the Mac
the interface went haywire. We don't know what's wrong, so we're recording from Silwal's phone.
Yes.
1+1.
1+3.
1+3, I have no idea.
Yes. You didn't have to mention it.
If the audio is not that great, blame Silwal.
Blame the phone. But just so you know, Satyal has a MacBook. I don't have a MacBook, and his MacBook just crashed. So perhaps it's time for someone to gift us a MacBook. Yeah, give it to Silwal this time. But
we'll take better care of it, right?
Now, last week we had a few feedbacks about how the conversations were more monotonous in the sense that you were just asking me questions and I was replying to them, and a lot of our fans, our millions and millions of fans wanted a reply on how Satyal would feel about those questions, but we thought better by thinking that perhaps it would turn out to be the same question but with just different answers. So we'll try to improve our conversations in the future where we try to interact with the both of us and not just have just one person there. Now, I have a set of questions for Satyal, and this is not just for Satyal, but he'll throw it back to me and we'll throw it back to our audience as well. But this was a 3 a.m. thought that just randomly popped to my head where I was not being able to sleep properly. And I don't know why, but I thought about dying and heaven and hell and everything. Mm-hmm. And throughout our podcasting journey, we've talked about how we need to introspect a lot and the importance of introspecting and everything. So I'm going to start off with an easy question. Say you're dead.
Very easy.
So say you're dead and you are now at the gates of heaven. There's probably a gatekeeper that is going to judge you on how you're going to enter heaven. So
but I thought only bad people judge you. Oh, can somebody
yes, that's a paradox in itself. But having said that, you're at the gates of heaven and you need to present an argument as to why you should be able to enter this heaven or paradise, and you need to just give me a few reasons as to why you should be there.
Oh man, it's such a difficult question though. Can I just say I've lived, I've loved, I've laughed? Is that enough to get me in?
Just ask the gatekeeper. Would you think just that would let you?
I think I would say I haven't lived a perfect life, or I hadn't lived a perfect life, but at points in my life I made it a point to contemplate, and whatever I felt I did wrong or could have done better, I've always strived to become better at that. So I don't think I would have lived a life where I was the center of the universe, where I thought I was the center of the universe and everything revolved around me, where there might have been a time when I felt that way, thought that way, but clearly the world wasn't interested and I got to learn about that in a harsh manner. So I would say if it's good enough for you that I wasn't perfect, but at the same time I realized my shortcomings and try to live a good life, then please let me in.
All right.
I don't know how convincing that was. No.
Let's hope the gatekeeper is a little more better at
but more importantly, rather than me getting in or not, like this is a very contemplative question. So I think it reminds me of my own life and how I fail at times and I've gotten back up again. And I think one reason as to why that person might let me in would be in my life, I've always kept impact and social impact at the forefront of all the activities that I do. So even the podcast, I would just say, see, we just have 70 views every week. You still do it. It's a lot of trouble, but yet we're still doing it, because even if that one person is listening and that one person is finding value in it, we've been doing it. So other things like that too. So I would say, because I've put impact at the forefront of whatever I've been doing, I feel like that might be a good enough reason, but then I'm no one to judge. So.
Yeah, because we do a lot of PowerPoint presentations and all. I thought you would say you take out your keynote and then show them a 300 slide keynote showing all the things that you did right and all the things. Having said that, what it makes me feel is, because you're not dead yet.
Okay, I just want to add one thing to that. I would just say, because I don't use bullet points, I've not killed anyone, so let me in. How's that one?
And that's how we make sure that our presentations are a lot more interesting. Now, having said that, I think because you've lived for 25 years, so far everything that you are basing yourself in is everything that has happened to you. But I'm not saying you're going to die tomorrow, but you'll die at the age of 50 or at the age of 60, or I don't know when. Yeah, I might just kill you one day. But my thing is, this question makes you reflect on whether you will live a life that is good enough to enter heaven as well. Not just the life that you've lived, but for the life that you've entered. Now, this was more of a simple question. Now, I am going to make changes to the same question. Now, let me just tell you that you're again dead, again for the second time, and you've reached the gates of heaven. And we're not being religious enough saying, that there's a heaven or a hell, but the idea of something more than just...
Yeah, I think it's more in terms of contemplation, and
Yes.
you've made it a lot more interesting than I could have made it last week.
Thank you.
I guess you and I both agree on the fact that we feel that there's a full stop after your death. There's no real heaven or hell. So we're just playing along. So.
Yeah, that's a different podcast where we talk about the scrutinies that goes behind heaven and hell. But all right, you're dead again. You've reached the gates of heaven. This time you cannot speak at all. But all the other people that you've ever impacted in life, big or small,
good or bad,
everyone that you've impacted on impacted your life or their life, you now are silent, and these people come and vote.
Wow.
Whether you get to go to heaven or not. Do you think you would be able to go to heaven?
Is there a case where if I get majority of yeses, then I get in?
Yeah, right now it is something like that. A majority of, let's say, 60% is the cutoff rate.
Okay. I think the interesting dynamic to this would be, you're talking about however small the impact may have been, right? So a lot of people maybe, I may have interacted, I might have just smiled at the janitor.
Yeah.
Now that person, because they don't know my life, they would just say, okay, this guy used to smile, so let me give a yes. So I guess it comes down to a lot of people judging me based on not knowing my entire story. But then that fraction of a second, so I guess it goes on to show how people judge you very quickly in life, and there might be off moments, right? We talk about mindfulness and all these things, but then even though I'm into this concept right now, it's very difficult to be 100% mindful. We talked about that statistic, right? 46.9% of the time you're doing something other than what you're doing. So I guess majority of the people, I feel whoever is eligible to vote would be indifferent. So I guess it would come down to their perception of whether someone else should get into heaven or not, which again comes down to how generous they are. So I guess, and I certainly feel like my getting into heaven or hell is a lot more dependent on
Other
people who are indifferent to how I've lived majority of my life than the actual people who actually have seen me impact their life. So this is a very dicey one.
Yeah, because let's say the cutoff was 60%. That is, out of 10 people, 6 people need to vote yes to your going inside heaven.
I want to give people the benefit of doubt, because if I was to vote for somebody, let's say a shopkeeper that I just met for 10 minutes, and if I was required to vote for him, I would definitely want him to go to heaven and rather than suffer in hell. So I'm presuming that people will think in that same
exactly
fashion. So
the concept that I'm trying to bring in here, and this is a random concept, it might not even make sense, but when we talk about introspecting, we talk about just about ourselves, what is inside of us. But what if we could introspect on someone else's life, looking back at our life? So that's a weird complex that I just had at 3 a.m. in the mornings. Yes, I'm reiterating that fact. Now, let's say, would you, all right, so 60%, would you get that cutoff rate? Would you yourself get that?
I think I would, because I would vote for that person. So I'm hoping for that reciprocity.
Because maybe you would say you'd get in. Now, what if I change that 60% into 100%? It has to be a unanimous vote, and you have to now make sure that everyone votes yes for you to go to heaven. Would you still make it to heaven?
Well, now this question relating to heaven suddenly reminded me of Mitch Albom's 5 People You Meet in Heaven. So in that case, even if people we've fucked up in their while we're living, if there's a reason to that, and if we only know that in heaven, then probably they would give me a unanimous vote. But I doubt if that happens, because that is just Mitch Albom's idea to it, right? To be very honest, because there are a lot of people I've done wrong to, and which...
Do you want to share anything that you've done wrong to?
Well, I don't know, man. I don't even think they'll listen to this podcast right now, but because that's life, right? And I remember this quote that you always used to tell me, and I love this when you say life is got to do a lot with trials and errors, and mostly errors. And yes, I've mostly made errors, but then because I've learned from those, I've tried not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So if I fuck up the relation I have with Silwal, then next time I do a podcast with someone else, I'll try not to do that. That's how I learned. So it's difficult, man. I don't think I'm getting a unanimous vote. I don't think I'll get in.
So the idea behind this was, and after thinking about it, it's more towards we see numerous quotes floating in the internet about how you should be forgiving about yourself. You cannot please everyone, and I think that's what I'm trying to reiterate here, where you just cannot convince everyone. Some days you intentionally flip off people because they've probably jumped the line that you were standing in. Probably they honked at you where it was a no honking zone, and you were angry at that and you were furious at that. But a lot of times maybe you were just having a bad day.
Yeah, maybe you're just an emotional displacement from some other trigger, and it just happened to fall on them.
And I think this thought came into my mind after thinking about that percent. 46% of the time you're mindful, but the rest of the time you're not mindful. So if we could be mindful about interacting with every humans that we essentially can, trying to give them the bestest of experience, not just in terms of giving them a good experience, but being mindful enough to at least not trigger their negative perception about yourself. But again, having said that, you cannot necessarily convince someone else. Some people might just hate you for who you are.
But maybe one twist to the plot would be if there was, the heaven was technologically advanced, and if they could see the action before or after the interaction, where I did not intend to hurt them, but something had happened and inadvertently something happened, then probably they would be forgiving. So just like we talk about video replays in football, maybe that would happen someday. I don't know.
All right, so Mr. Satyal flipped off this person.
And just have a retrospective action. I don't know.
So that was a whole different sports terminologies that we just went into. But the third part of it was that, where a lot of times the interaction that we have with one-off person, a shopkeeper or a janitor or someone who we do not have daily interactions with, they just see that certain point of interaction with you, and they will judge you based on that. True. But if there was a way for them to look at you till that point of how you've lived, maybe would you then say, if everyone had that same opportunity where they saw your entire life of how you reacted or how you've acted, not just with themselves, but with other people as well, would you think you would have a more leniency in terms of voting, and they would give you the unanimous yes?
I think so, because then they would go on to see other sides of my life as well, which they don't really see in that brief moment of interaction. So they would, first and foremost, I think, not just for me, but for everyone else, because everyone else would be voting for somebody else, that I guess it would just go on to show how difficult a human life really is. You're not just dealing with one person, right? You might forget to smile at a janitor, and that person might look at you as a very cold person, but then prior to that, you might have something else, or you might have this big meeting coming up, and that next promotion depends on that, and your kid getting into a good school depends on that, and there's this whole new dimension to it. So I guess we'd be very lenient on people, and would be more forgiving, more compassionate if that was the case. And I think it's the same goes for me as well. And another thing is, at the beginning of the pod, I said, because I've always tried to learn from my mistakes, I've never been perfect. I guess they would go on to see that even if I had hurt them, I'd made it a point not to hurt other people on similar areas after learning from them. So they might also go on to see, if they're seeing the whole picture, then they would probably see times when I was having a monologue with myself, thinking about the person and wishing how I could go back and ask for forgiveness, but for some reason or the other, life happened, I couldn't really go back. So I guess they would, show more compassion and sympathy, and I guess that's the same how I would see the world as well, how you would see the world as well. And I think this just goes on to show how compassionate and wonderful a world it would be if every one of us could actually look through the person and see that whole world just right in front of them, in that brief moment where we actually tend to shout at them.
Yeah, because I thought of this, and I also imagined why people would say yes to that unanimous voting, or why would they think they would say no. My reason for why, if any one of you listening right now says no, you would still not get a unanimous decision, that just means that you've introspected a little more about yourself, and you've not been the best person that you could be.
True.
And there was anger and hurt, and there was actions that you did which does not justify in the long run, or the actions that you've done. So it makes you think more in terms of how you've been as a person, and perhaps there might be moments for you to redeem yourself in the future. Because as much as we'd want to fantasize about going back in time and making things up, or just if let's say Satyal and I had a big discussion the next day, what if I cannot meet him anymore? I will lose out on the fact that I can go to him and then say, sorry man for whatever happened last night or anything. So a lot of times we miss out on things and people, and tell them you're sorry about the actions that you've done, because as you've rightly said, sometimes just life happens, and you cannot go on, or you cannot ask for forgiveness. But having said that, once again, what these questions that are trying to do is just making you more aware about your surroundings, the interactions that you have with people. And as you said, how compassionate would the world be if every one of us were as compassionate, knowing that you have a story, I have a story, and there's a big deal that is going out there. An angry person is not just angry because he was born angry. There are certain reasons and actions and retrospective whatever you were saying. I just like that word. So everything has a reason as to why that person is angry. And as Mitch Albom wrote in his book, the favorite book of ours, Tuesdays with Maury, it does talk about if you're angry, if you're sad, know that those are emotions as well. And right now, a lot of times I see people where they cannot forgive themselves for the actions that they've done. And it would be better if you could just forgive yourself for a while. Just know that you are sorry for maybe that unnecessary anger that came out of your mind, or were put into words and actions, and just try to better yourself. As Satyal has said, it's about not repeating the same mistakes that you've done with the other person. So that was the kind of idea that we had. Now we're almost at the end of it. Satyal, do you have anything
I just
more
want to say, I am pretty sure this is going to be my favorite episode. I love the idea, and kudos to you. The only problem with you, my friend, is you take a whole of 71 episodes to come with such a brilliant night. We'll be back again next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. And one last thing.
It's never too late to start.